by being so committed to not calling this a crisis, it's kind of boxed them in politically because you now have Republicans who are able to point out that, well, you used this word as recently as February 2nd to describe what's going on the border. Why aren't you using it anymore? This looks like politics. And that's, they're frankly right about that. I'm here to break down the issue of immigration, a new issue that the Biden administration is grappling with when, frankly, they want to be focusing on a number of other things. The first question most people have is, what's going on? Why is there this surge on the southern border? It is an annual occurrence by this point for a long time now. February, March, April, May, that is generally the time of year where the numbers increase. But even given that, the numbers in February were eye-popping. Nearly 100,000 migrants were apprehended at the US-Mexico border. We don't have the final numbers for March, but for instance, there was a day recently where 4,500 migrants were apprehended on one day. Jay Johnson, the Obama-era head of the Department of Homeland Security, has said any day over 1,000 apprehensions he considered a crisis. The biggest month we've had in recent history was May 2019, with 133,000 migrants apprehended. So we are on track for the biggest spike in decades. The message of the Biden campaign was much more immigrant friendly, despite the fact that Joe Biden was recently asked in an interview about this, and he issued a warning saying,
I can say quite clearly, don't come.
So the last three presidents have treated immigration and asylum in different ways. And sometimes the difference has really been more about the rhetoric than the actual policies. Obama was extremely immigrant friendly in his rhetoric, but as activists are very quick to point out, he deported a record number of migrants in his early years. He argued at the time and since that it was a political decision, that he needed to be extremely tough on the border in order to convince Republicans and frankly some Democrats in Congress to pass a comprehensive immigration reform plan. So that was the political calculation of the Obama era. It didn't work. Trump, of course, comes in with a complete rejection of his party and the Democrats' view of immigration, lots of extremely harsh rhetoric, a high number of deportations, and we all know an effort to build a wall. Fast forward to Biden. His entire campaign is a rejection of Trump, obviously. Biden also is a rejection of Obama in some ways, because he's forced during the campaign to recognize that they deported too many people. One of the biggest issues is how to deal with unaccompanied minors. Our immigration reporter, Sabrina Rodríguez, was down at the border recently, and here's how she explained the problem for the Biden administration.
In February, we saw it was about almost 9,500 unaccompanied children that arrived at the border. And Biden, instead of sending them back almost immediately, the way he's doing with adults and many families, is sheltering them. The problem, though, is when they come into the country, they have to go into CBP custody. CBP custody is basically when we think of like the cages or the jail-like cells, that's what CBP custody looks like. Under law, children are not supposed to be there for more than 72 hours. So Biden is running up against capacity constraints, partly because of the pandemic, partly just because of the sheer numbers that are arriving, of moving them out of that CBP custody and into shelters.
On February 2nd, in an executive order related to asylum, the Biden administration did call this a crisis. They have since dropped that word, and as recently as March 22nd, Jen Psaki was telling reporters,
children presenting at our border who are fleeing violence, who are fleeing prosecution, who are fleeing terrible situations is not a crisis.
And calling it a crisis means that the White House is going to be more seized by that issue. They want to talk about the twin crises that they think they were most elected to solve: COVID and the economy. This immigration issue has always been very fraught for Joe Biden. He inherited, of course, the Obama administration's heavy emphasis on deportations, and that cost him a lot with the left during the primaries, especially in some of the debates.
Then you serve as vice president in an administration that deported 3 million people, the most ever in US history. Did you do anything to prevent those deportations?
Famously, when Julian Castro proposed decriminalizing border crossings by undocumented immigrants, several of the other Democratic presidential candidates jumped on that bandwagon, but Joe Biden noticeably did not. And the reason he didn't is because he did know that immigration was a difficult issue in the general election against Trump. There is one school of thought that looks at the data from 2020 and sees and believes that this issue of immigration cost Democrats. Democrats believed the politics of comprehensive immigration reform was a net plus for them, that Republicans' opposition to comprehensive immigration reform would damage them with the fastest growing populations, like Hispanics and Asian Americans. Things have reversed now. Republicans believe that immigration and immigration restrictionism is now a good issue for them. Meanwhile, Democrats have moved further to the left on immigration after years and years of promising immigration activists that they would get something done. So they can't put in place the restrictionist policies that, frankly, Obama did early in his tenure. In essence, the Democrats have moved left on the issue, while the country may have moved right.